Morning, and yeah, I'm in the bedroom. um, I don't have sports on TV right now. Can't find the remote, and I'm upstairs. Um, there's a game starting in 10 minutes. This video won't be uploaded until probably long after that game has started, and I apologize for that, but it's one of those things. Okay, the game that's on this morning is Carolina and Toronto, and it's a matchup between Scott Darling and Freddie Anderson. Darling's been wildly inconsistent. To expect a fantastic game from him is probably a little too much. Freddie Anderson has been excellent for Toronto in recent weeks, past month. The issues in Toronto stem with the guy who's got the concussion nobody's talking about. Nobody with the team has confirmed it's a concussion for Austin Matthews. It's clearly a concussion. It's pretty obvious. Riley runs into him. And Morgan Riley's got to feel awful. Like, he has to feel terrible right now. Because if the team goes further south while Matthews is out and he knows he's the one that hit him, he's just got to feel awful. I can't imagine it's easy when it's an opponent that you knock out of a game like that. But when it's a teammate, it has to be just terrible. I'm sure his teammates won't say anything, his coach won't say anything, but he's got to feel pretty bad right now because it does kind of submarine Toronto. Any statement, however, that Toronto's going to miss the playoffs, even if they lose a game like this today, I can't see it. It's the Atlantic. Look how far back they'd have to fall in order to miss the playoffs. Top three's kind of theirs. There's a team that's behind them, though, that wouldn't mind seeing them lose a couple more, and then if they can pick up a couple of wins, get a little closer. But I'll get to them in a second. In terms of where they lie right now, the Toronto Maple Leafs, I still think are a good team. I still think they are top 16 at the very least. They're a playoff team. We'll see tonight if they can bounce back. And Carolina, while they're playing better and they're on this nice winning streak, Toronto is still the better team, I think. I look at goaltending and I look at their depth up front, and I'd put Toronto ahead of them. Anaheim is New York against the Rangers. Lundqvist hasn't been confirmed, but it's highly likely it's Lundqvist against likely John Gibson because Miller started last night. Coming off of that loss last night, I do wonder about how Anaheim's going to feel on a back-to-back. You have a team in Anaheim that's clearly fragile. It's been hurting for a while, and they can go one of two ways on this road trip. That loss in Jersey last night is not a good sign. They need to bounce back. They need to jump on the Rangers early because they will be exhausted by the end of this game. And the New York Rangers absolutely are in a position to take advantage of a weak team and bump their way up in the standings. I personally think the Rangers probably win this. I don't think it matters whether it's Lundqvist or Pavlich right now because Pavlich has been relatively good in the games he's played recently, which helps because Lundqvist is going to need more nights off as the season rolls along. And I just don't know how much faith I have left that Anaheim's going to turn it around. I just don't know. All right. Detroit is playing the Islanders, and we're looking at Jimmy Howard being likely and Thomas Greiss being confirmed. The Islanders are in a playoff position right now, and they look good to make the playoffs. The Red Wings aren't and don't. Howard, whether it's Howard or whether it's Mrazek, Howard has been good when he's played. Mrazek hasn't been awful. It's really a matter of, I think, a lot of the Detroit frontline players that you're waiting for to turn things around are young. And they're probably a year or two out from their maximum capability in terms of their scoring and their defensive work, their ability as all-around players. I honestly think this is going to be a bounce-back game for the Islanders. I think this could be like a 3-0 shutout for Greiss. Greiss is overdue for that kind of game. And for Detroit, the issue really is with Detroit, it's a matter of time. This is a rebuild. Is what they're going through. And when people ask me, well, where do you see Rasmus Dahlin going? I don't know, but he'd be a perfect fit. He'd be a perfect fit in Detroit. If he really is the next coming of Nicholas Lidstrom, what better place to put him than Detroit? And then all the conspiracy theories can come out. Oh, Detroit was great. Now they're bad for a year or two, and suddenly Rasmus Dahlin falls into their lap. How convenient. It's the kind of thing that you do here when draft lotteries take place and the draft takes place. But that is a situation where I think they will be looking for somebody. Remember, Green's contract is up at the end of the year. They may try to keep him, but they're going to want him to take less money, and he may be able to get $6 million a year somewhere else. Detroit is a team that's currently cap strapped. If Green goes, they're not cap strapped anymore, and if Dahlin is there as an entry level contract, suddenly they have cap space to work with. Suddenly they look good. We'll see. It's one of those storylines that'll continue to develop as the season develops. Okay, Boston and Buffalo. So the Bruins are coming off of this big win over Columbus, right? 7-2. Hudobin's in net. I can't see Rask playing back-to-backs. Leonard's been confirmed for Buffalo. Boston looks fast. They look confident, and they look good. I'd be very surprised if they somehow blew this game against Buffalo. Is it possible? Oh, absolutely. It was mentioned on my review video from last night that the Bruins are allowing breakaways and odd man rushes the other way. That's inexperience. There's a lot of inexperience in this lineup, and inexperienced teams will often cough up the puck offensively, and it'll lead to huge rushes the other way. Sometimes the kid players are so busy trying to score the goals they forget they have to go the other way too, and that includes defensemen. I think we're starting to see a new generation of defensemen who rove, sort of like, not to the same extent of defensemen in the 80s and early 90s, but they rove a heck of a lot more than they did 10 years ago. And when you look at the ice time being given to, McAvoy in Boston as an example, you can get a lot of ice time as a rookie defenseman right now, and that didn't used to be the case. And it will lead to odd man rushes and breakaways the other way. The good news for Boston is you got Charlie McAvoy back there, and he looks pretty darn good. Now, if you're Buffalo, all the talk right now is, where's Evander Kane going? I'd be very surprised if Evander Kane doesn't re-up in Buffalo, to be honest. I'd be really surprised if he moves on from Buffalo. It's a marriage that works. Everybody seems to be happy about it, and I'd be very surprised if it didn't work. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't sign like a 4 or 5 year extension in Buffalo, and soon. Look, I get it. You want to do a rebuild. You want to go get younger assets and draft picks. But when it's your number one scorer, and he's not exactly over the hill, yeah, he can get you assets back. The question you ask yourself is, what are the odds of those assets being worth more than him? And that's that fine balancing act, and that's why Sakic had to wait so long to trade Duchesne. And I chided him for it, but I have to applaud him for the end result. Maybe Kane's going to be the same thing, maybe not, but either way, I see him staying in Buffalo. I know there's fans in other cities that, especially in Vancouver, you'll hear about, oh, he's going to go there. I just don't see it. He seems to be better in Buffalo, less distracted. There's less talk about his conduct and his maturity level in Buffalo than there was in Winnipeg. And he's not going to have the same scrutiny as he would in, say, a Vancouver, a Montreal, or a Toronto, or anything like that. So I think he's likely quite happy to be where he is, and I'd be quite surprised if he moves on. I've been surprised before, so it could happen. All right. That soapbox being gone and all, let's move on to the next. Minnesota and Ottawa. So Stalock and Anderson are confirmed as the goalies here. Ottawa's coming off of back-to-back wins. In order to make a 3, they got to beat a tired Minnesota team. Minnesota's coming off of a loss against Chicago. That followed a loss against Edmonton. People can point the finger at Stalock if they want and say, well, with Dubnyk out, they're done. But Stalock isn't the one who only scored 3 goals in those 2 games. If Minnesota's offense can't generate more than a goal and a half per game, it doesn't matter who's in net. I don't think Dubnyk wins those games either. And for Anderson, he's on a little bit of an upswing right now. That shutout win has to give him confidence, and I would look for him to ride that. He is a goaltender capable of, when he's hot, he can look pretty damn near unstoppable. And we'll see. I think we'll see that tonight. I have a funny feeling Ottawa's going to win that game over Minnesota. I think that's going to be a win for Ottawa, and I think it's going to be fun to watch. This is where I mentioned I'm going to be at work tonight, so I'm not going to see any of this. The only game I'm going to be able to watch is going to be the Toronto Carolina game, and even that one, I'll watch as much of it as I can. It's just starting now. I do anticipate a Toronto win. I'd be kind of surprised if Carolina wins it. Of course, their first game this year was a barn burner. It was a great game, so I'm looking for more of that today. But with this game, look for Minnesota to try to score early, try to build momentum, because if they let Ottawa build any momentum right now with the way they've been playing their last couple of games, and if Minnesota falls behind, this could get ugly early. Absolutely, it could. And everybody will throw their stones at Stalock, but it's not going to be Stalock's fault. It's not Stalock's fault that the team isn't scoring right now. Winnipeg and Nashville. We are now looking at a matchup that could determine whether Winnipeg stays in that first row on my power rankings or if they drop. Nashville is probably the second best team in the league. That seems to be consensus right now. All the power rankings seem to state it. And Winnipeg is on the edge of it. For Winnipeg to get into the thick of it, this is the game they need to win. They're in Nashville. Winnipeg's road record, not tremendous. Now, Hellebuck is a good goaltender. So's Rene. It should be a low-scoring game, but I could see it going to overtime, and I could see Winnipeg coming out on the short end because it's on the road. It's weird how some teams are great at home and they're middling on the road, and I can kind of understand it because traditionally teams are better at home than on the road. Of course, that's why they call it home ice advantage. But in some cases in the NHL right now, it's such a stark difference between the home and road records. And Winnipeg is one of those teams that it's a totally different game when they're at home. They have to be able to play that way on the road tonight, and they have to do it in a really tough barn to play in Nashville against a goaltender who's been very good, Pekka Rinne. We'll see what happens with that one. But I actually would like to see a Winnipeg win, just because I'd like to see those three teams as closely bunched together as possible. The fact is that the more tightly bunched those three teams are at the top, the more intense those games get, the better those teams are, and the more fun the hockey is to watch. Okay, let's get to Washington and Dallas. So the Dallas Stars, as wildly inconsistent as they've been on the road, they've been very good at home. Washington's likely starting Holtby. Dallas is starting Bishop. Washington on this road trip, they're going to go in and play Vegas on Saturday. First, they got to go through Dallas. I think they got one more stop before they get to Vegas. Minimum, I think, one more stop. But Holtby, if he plays, is capable of shutting down Dallas if Dallas's confidence is not buoyed by being at home. We'll find out. I mean, they had a semi-successful road trip. I'm not overly enthused about them right now. It's hard because this is where that whole divide happens of, well, Shannon, you cheer for Dallas, so clearly you're going to favor them. I'm actually a lot harder on the teams that I cheer for than I am on other teams. And in Dallas's case, it's still there. That concern is still there. Bishop is a fantastic goaltender. Dallas has a solid team. They've got 4 or 5 really good scoring forwards. They got some of my favorite depth forwards in the whole league. They've got a solid, if unspectacular, core on the blue line. And as long as they stay out of penalty trouble, they should be able to handle Washington at home. And yet, there's a feeling in the pit of my stomach of, yeah, but that's the team you cheer for. So how unbiased are you really? So it's there for me too, and it leads to me criticizing them far more than I would criticize somebody else with the same record. Uh, Dallas has a solid record, and they have even odds against Washington tonight. Looks like the betting is split between the two. So, it's kind of a pick'em situation, and yet I always kind of feel like, well, if they win, it'll be a miracle. It's strange for me even, and yet in the midst of this, Washington's coming in having won. I think it's 10 out of 13. Washington's been fantastic, and it's been more depth in terms of scoring, and the fact that Tom Wilson has finally rounded into what looks like a top six forward makes Washington all the more dangerous. They needed it. They needed that kid to take that step forward. He has. And if he can keep that up, Washington can absolutely win that division. Could come down to Washington and New Jersey in about a month fighting for that division title. I still think by the end of the year, I still think we've got Washington. I can't bet against Pittsburgh turning it around because it's Pittsburgh. And I still think Columbus is going to, I think they would be the top three. But it's such a close division. It is so hard to call. I know there are people who don't like it when I say it, but that's what I think is going to happen. Jim Rutherford's going to do something to turn around Pittsburgh, and it'll work out because it usually does. Okay, let's move on. And we've got Florida with likely James Reimer and Antti Ranta in net for Arizona. Now Ranta's been good. Ranta's a very solid goaltender, but Arizona is a bad team, colossally bad. They are historically bad, and they're at home against a Florida team that's been bad on the road. I would be very surprised if Arizona doesn't win this game, which means Florida's going to win it. Florida's around 500 in terms of their record. They're lingering, they're hanging around, and again, since that division's perceived as being weak, maybe you can get on a run. It'll be tough without Luongo, but it would be tough with Luongo as well. And again, I want to say Arizona should win this, and yet I don't know. Arizona's found a way to lose a lot of games. I believe their record is 7-25 if you just combine their losses and overtime losses. I think they've won 7 out of 32. It might be 7 out of 34. It's bad. The point is, it's really bad. And betting against them being really bad tonight might be folly. If not for a 10-game stretch where they won 4 games, Arizona would be even worse. They're not in the historically bad category at this point. They've pulled themselves out of that. But when you're having a season that's so bad that you can turn to your fans and say, well, at least we're not historically bad now, that's really, really quite bad still. And that game could be a high scoring one. That could be a 5-4 or 6-5 type game. Run and gun, I could see it. Just based on both teams being desperate. Reimer inconsistent. Ranta's been good, but his defense in front of him has just been awful. If Florida's allowed to tee off with guys like Huberdeau and Barkov and Trocheck and name any other forward in here, they have the scoring depth to hurt you. Absolutely in Florida. So it could be a really, really ugly game. Or it could just be one of those games where it's two bad teams playing each other, and you know it's two bad teams because you can't watch it. It's unwatchable. It does happen. Okay, so the game of the night. The big game of the night. And again, I work till 10 o'clock tonight, so I'm going to miss it. It's Tampa Bay and Vegas. Vegas has this great narrative going as the greatest first-year team ever, and they are. At this point, it would take some colossal collapse for Carolina not to have the best first-year record of any team in the NHL's history. And I'm thinking even including the 1967 expansion, which was, 6 teams in 67 and doubled the league and watered things down tremendously right off the bat. This has the tendency to look like it absolutely could be the best first year ever. And I didn't expect that before the season. I didn't expect them to be bad, but I expected maybe a Minnesota Wild level season, maybe about 23, 24 wins. Well, they're almost there now. And Marc-Andre Fleury's unconfirmed, Vasilevsky's unconfirmed, but how could they not be the starters tonight? They're going to be the starters. This is the game where Vegas shows, yes, we're for real. We're in this thing. Even if it's close. So even if Tampa were to win this game 3-2, even if they won it 4-2 with an empty netter, it would prove that Vegas is for real and they're ready to compete with the best team in the league. If they get killed, we can look at that and say, well, it's rare that they get killed, so we're just going to ignore it. It's one game and throw it away. If Vegas wins this game, and if Vegas wins big, the whole NHL kind of gets flipped on its ear. Anybody who's been complaining about how slowly the Vegas Golden Knights have moved up my rankings, currently number 9, spoiler alert, this game would vault them immediately. If they were to win this game and win it, say 5-2, something of that score, it absolutely drives them straight up that chart. It doesn't necessarily drop Tampa down a whole lot either, depending on what Nashville does and where I see them in relation to St. Louis after the game. It's going to be a good game, and I'm sadly not going to be able to see it. It actually does kind of tick me off that I won't get to see it. Okay, the last game of the night, and I'm fine not seeing this one, is Montreal and Vancouver. All right, so I've got a bit of a headache here because Besser's out. They know it's a bone bruise. They won't tell us how long because they don't know. Horvat's out. Bertschy's out. I'm pretty sure Tanev is still out. Goodbranson's still out. Brandon Sutter's still out. Dorsett's retired. Let me know when any of this becomes pertinent, because I anticipate a nice long stretch of bad games by the Canucks and a lot of people piling on them. And saying injuries aren't an excuse, even though injuries are used as an excuse elsewhere. As a Canucks fan, I wince looking at this game. You always have a game where Montreal fans are more plentiful than Vancouver when they're in town. That goes back to the 80s. The only hockey game I ever saw in the 80s, I went with my dad to see Montreal and Vancouver, and Montreal won that game 4-1, and I'm pretty sure there were more Montreal fans in the stands that night than Vancouver. My dad was there cheering for Montreal. And we were stuck behind some obnoxious lady with a cowbell who rang it every time Stan Smeel touched the puck. And it's surprising that I came out of that game still liking Stan Smeel. But to me, this game, it's an important game for Montreal. Montreal right now sits at 500, and they're in a spot where if they want to get back into the Atlantic hunt, they have to do it with a game like this. They're facing a Canucks team that has not a lot of confidence. Not a lot of top-end talent. I love the Sedins, but their days as top-end talents are done. Part of the reason the Canucks ended up right near the bottom of the league last year is because they were still in a primary role. Part of the reason the Canucks have done well to this point in the season, compared to what they were supposed to be, is because Travis Green saw that and diminished their role. Let all the kids with speed play, gave Derek Dorsett a bunch of ice time because he was gritty and he fit in well with these kids. And now you don't have Dorsett, you don't have the kids, and you're stuck relying on the Sedins again. The Sedins will give it all their effort in the world, and I anticipate a Montreal victory. I don't know the final score because I'm not psychic. If I was, I'd be out there playing Sports Action instead in here talking to you guys. But Montreal's had scoring problems. Good news. The Canucks have goaltending issues. Montreal's missing Shea Weber. Good news. Most of the Canucks' talented forwards won't be out there to test that defense anyways. Carey Price is a much better goaltender than Jacob Markstrom. And in terms of their forward groups right now, Montreal has the advantage too. Everything is a landslide towards Montreal in this game tonight. We'll see what the actual result is. but it points to a Montreal win. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. It's been a while since I did a video up here, but these things happen. I work tonight, and then I don't work again until I think it's January 13th is the next day I win after, or next day I work after tonight, because my work is closed down for the holidays. So thank you guys for watching, and hit the like and subscribe buttons if you're browsing your way through. And hey, you guys make it worth me doing all this every day, and thank you for your support. Oh, and one note here. Some guy, some subscriber named Ryan Burke, apparently it's his birthday today. His girlfriend Kaylin told me that, so it was recommended that I wish him a happy birthday. And there's your timestamps. That's what I'm always writing. I'm writing timestamps. Got to ask yesterday, what are you writing? I'm writing timestamps. With a pen on paper. Back in the old days, that's what we used instead of that notepad on your phone. Yeah, so happy birthday to Ryan Burke. Apparently this makes your girlfriend the best in the world. That's debatable. I would say that my wife is the best girlfriend in the world, but hey. We all are entitled to our differences of opinion. Thank you guys for watching. Happy birthday to Ryan, and to any other subscriber whose birthday may be today. Now that we're approaching 25,000, I would imagine it's a number of your birthdays today. Maybe I'll just throw happy birthday at the end of preview videos for the rest of the year. People go, he wished me a happy birthday. But in this case, it's specific. Ryan, happy birthday. Thank you very much for being out there, and I'll talk to you again soon.